everybody, we're back. So we tried to troubleshoot this as much as we can. We know how to run cameras, we know how to take pretty pictures and cut them together, but it is the devil's in the details. It's the little things that can really just throw a wrench in you. So I've got Tobe right here on speakerphone. Say hi to the good.
Hello.
Say hi to the good people, Tobe.
Is this actually happening?
Is this like the most like? I might as well have like a tin can with some string hanging out of it. Oh,
I
there
don't
you
want to
are.
bore people with the details, but it's obviously a conspiracy. Let's just go with that angle. Everything great happens 18 minutes late, so screw off, everybody. We know what's happening. What's going on, Jill?
Oh, Tobe. Well, okay. So I made small talk. I was trying to, kill some time to get you back on. And what can I say? I'm just so used to having you to interact with and feed off of, and it's like
you were doing fine. I was watching the whole thing. It was like you had it. You're like a young Megyn Kelly. It was all you. You were doing fine.
Okay. Well,
I saw where you were.
It was making me feel like that episode of the Brady Bunch when Cindy goes on the quiz show and she's like a deer in headlights and she just freezes and doesn't know what to do. So I'm glad you're here. We'll get through this. Thanks for those of you who are sticking with it and who abandoned ship. Can y'all hear Tobe? Is this working?
Yeah, I can see you too. I see your groovy little hat. Makeup looks fresh and great. You've got Jeff Rohn on here saying take two, perfect form. And so, anyway.
Okay. So let's, I kind of went over kind of the recap of the things we're going to talk about in tonight's show. And I hope Daryl Adams jumped on over from the last chat because, like I said, we're going to talk about Travis Taylor's interview. And when I think of Skinwalker Ranch, I automatically think of the Al Moon Lab and all the adventures you guys had there. And so we'll get into some other stuff. And like I said, if you're just tuning in, hey, A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, and Bigfoot Revealed is now available on Paraflix, which is a paranormal streaming platform. And they don't have as much in terms of cryptid stuff, but a lot of ghost stuff, a lot of like paranormal investigations and whatnot. So if that's your thing, please check it out. It's my
Paraflix, huh? I'm going to have to check out Paraflix.
Paraflix.
Is that 2 flicks for one? I like it. All right.
Not one, Paraflix. Not two. Para.
But a Paraflix.
Awesome. Gotcha. So, but hey, before we get too far into my OCD multitasking list, I did want to read an email we got from one of our YouTube subscriber. I think a subscriber. He's a listener. He emailed us from the show. And this is from James, and he gave us permission to share these. And I will say this, we do get a lot of emails, but then when I ask, oh, can we share this on the live stream? A lot of times I get, no, I'm just sharing with you. So James was kind enough to allow us to read this, and I just wanted to share it. I thought it was pretty cool. So here we go. Are you ready, Tobe?
I am.
Okay.
I'm hydrated and ready.
Are you drinking Bigfoot tea?
I just teed it up for you.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Hydrated and ready to go. Mm-hmm. So this is from James. I have had 3 encounters with Bigfoot. The first one was when I was 14. I'm 63 now. Us kids used to hang around a park called Bowness Park in Calgary, Alberta. I went down one night to see if anyone was around. When I got to where we would gather, no one was there. The park is beside the Bow River. From upstream, I could hear what sounded like a woman crying hysterically. Loud, very loud. I thought someone might be hurt or something, so I followed the sound. That sounds familiar. How many times have we heard reports of people thinking that they're hearing a woman in distress out in the woods? That night, the moon was shining bright and all the stars were out, so seeing was very well. I walked up behind a Bigfoot sitting on the riverbank with its head in its hands. I was 10 or 12 feet behind it when it stood up. It had grayish white hair covering most of its body, at least 4 foot wide at the shoulders, and about 9 feet tall, had to be 800 pounds. Its face didn't have much hair, and it looked more human than ape. Sounds familiar. It actually sounds like Daryl Wilson's account of what he saw in Alaska. I was frozen in my tracks. I couldn't move. I remember my first thought being, monsters are real. Our eyes were locked on each other's for what seemed like forever. Then something kind of strange happened. It mind spoke to me and said, I won't hurt you. I then pointed upriver and said out loud, you have to go that way to get away from here. It stood there for another minute, then turned and walked into the darkness of the trees. As soon as as soon as it was out of sight, I turned and started running. I came in second in the city final for 100 yards. I was a fast kid, and I could hear it running along beside me in the big poplar trees. In 3 heavy steps, it would be 20 feet ahead of where I was. It would hit a poplar tree with its hand to stop so hard it shook the ground. It followed me like that until I got to the first street light in the park, and I didn't stop running until I was three blocks out of the park. Just a side note, it would be interesting based on the height he's giving to try to figure out like what the stride would be based on kind of that scenario. I will
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I will let someone else figure that out.
And because of the delay, I'm just listening. So keep going.
Okay, story time for Toad. The next one I saw was 2 years later. We had moved out of the city to a little farm. Shut up. Theaton. The ne- Damn it. You guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, James. Okay. Seriously. The next one I saw was 2 years later. We'd moved out of the city to a little farm right where the foothill to the Rocky Mountains start. I got permission from the big ranch beside us to go up and horseback ride. Way back out in the bush, I found a clear water spring that came out of the ground. I thought it would be a great spot to camp for a night or two. Oh, the next day I got together a few things, a tarp, enough food for 2 days, an axe, etc. Put it in my backpack and took off on foot. On the way into the bush, a red lab dog started following me and wouldn't turn back. So I found a piece of bale twine and made a leash and took the dog with me. We got to the spot, I set up camp, then I made me and the dog something to eat. Then I tied my backpack 14 to 16 feet off the ground to keep it away from the animals. Then I tied the dog's rope to my foot so it wouldn't run off. We both fell asleep pretty fast. At 3:15 a.m., I woke up to the worst smell. It was like a garbage dump, but 10 times worse. The dog was just cowering and shaking, but it never made a sound. Just then, I heard a twig snap over by where my backpack was. I peeked over the lean to see a huge Bigfoot reaching for my pack. His fingers were inches away from getting it. I freaked out and ducked back under the lean to and tried to keep the dog quiet. It must have given up after a few minutes because the smell went away. Both me and the dog stayed up till first light, then we got the heck out of there. Not sure I would not sure I should share the rest, but I will. The next day, I was telling the neighbor girl about what I'd seen, and she wanted me to take her back to see if we could find any tracks or anything. We left to go kind of late in the day. We couldn't find tracks or any kind of sign. Hiking back, we had to cross a big valley with a big hill on the side we were going to. As we were dropping into the valley, we could see flashing white and blue lights moving slowly down the valley but not making a sound. We both took off running, and we were 3/4 of the way up the big hill when we couldn't go anymore. Whatever it was, whatever it was at about the same height up elevation, height up as us, but didn't make a sound. I can't say for sure, but I believe there's some sort of connection there. The last thing I had, the last one I had a camp shirt and hat on and was sitting on the bank of the Clearwater River in Alberta. The river right there is maybe 25 feet wide and it's fast running river, so it makes some noise. I was sitting with my rod in my hand when out of the willows on the other bank, a deer came running out straight for me. I could tell it had been running hard because its tongue was hanging out, breathing hard. Right behind it, I thought was a bear at first. The deer, just before it jumped in the water to cross across from me, saw me, changed directions, and stayed on that side. By the time I noticed that the thing chasing it was walking on two legs with its arms stretched out trying to grab it. I watched them both zigzag around on the gravel bar for a good minute. Then I heard a loud thud when it hit the deer across the back. The deer was dead
Mhm.
before it hit the ground. It didn't even kick or twitch. I coughed into my hand as quiet as I could from about 30 or 40 yards away, and it looked right at me. It just picked up the deer with one arm and walked off with it.
Wow.
Tobe, what do you think?
Well, I don't mean to laugh. I mean, it's a traumatic ending to a pretty incredible encounter. I mean, it sounds like there could be a lifetime of experiences in here with this individual. And how did you come across this report again? I'm sorry.
He submitted it to us. He
That's
emailed
incredible.
he emailed it to us, and James, I apologize for I was not, by no means was I finding humor in any of this. Tobe started giggling and it set me off. So I have no self-control when
No, no,
I start breaking
I,
down.
yeah, no, it's yeah, I think that they'll probably understand that, but um, there's just so much going on as far as the behavior is concerned of these beings and what they allow you to observe. I mean, so often people could never imagine having an encounter like that. I mean, to see a Bigfoot kill actually take place, I mean, I can maybe count on maybe one hand of really interesting reports like that. So that's just like, if this person is listening, I hope they are. You had lightning in a bottle. I don't know how many bottles you have of lightning, but that's quite the experience. One I'm sure that they won't ever forget.
And I wondered, is that just being in the right place at the right time, or is it, I don't know, is it that kind of that being tagged in a way where you're just more prone to see these things?
Mm. Well, I mean, that's where we're leaning as a group. I mean, we're all leaning into the world of synchronicity and these convergent realities. In fact, you see it happening all the time where there's a convergence of information all pointing to liminal states and synchronicities, and nothing is a mistake. And is that us just, sitting on our laurels, not doing the research to study behavior? I actually think so. Sometimes I think that is the case, and that's where you have to kind of look at these apers in the community and go, well, they have a point. Like, not everything is divine intervention. Sometimes there's interesting behavior to have there. So,
Mhm.
maybe that was the time of year where that always happens in that spot. There could have been things pointing to that happening that maybe were not found. It could be found later as far as like game trails, or, how many times have we heard stories about animals being mutilated or found in tree branches wrapped around like dish towels? That's kind of like a fairly common thing that people describe. Just like, no, this animal wasn't just predated. Its body was whipped around a branch like a wet rag, or that it was completely devastated, to the degree where it just didn't seem like this was just a normal cougar attack.
Well, yeah, and I think of Tammy's experience in Michigan in the UP, where she was gifted a deer and the legs were completely broken and the neck was snapped back. I just, that's not, I mean, what? What
Mhm.
animal? What would do that in the wild, and why? Like, I think we know the
Yeah, and you went
answer.
on to say that the legs were actually, I hate to be so, probably get banned here, but the legs were actually pushed inside the cavity, correct?
I don't remember that. I just remember Tammy's in the chat if she wants to
Okay.
jump
There was
in.
something about that where it was an abnormal disposition of where the legs.
They were busted
Um,
up. I know that. Hey,
yeah.
and when people talk about, what you just said, uh, the like deer and whatnot game being found. I mean, obviously, I get that cougar and whatnot. They can take their kill up in a tree and stuff. But was it Daryl once again? Daryl Adams. Um, who was it that found like the deer head and the antlers jammed into a tree like 20 feet up or something? Do you?
Oh, so that was a story that came via the pumpkin patch, which is where we sell our produce, and it was one of the actually it was I think it was a friend of Larry and Inella from the Macaw Reservation, or at
Okay.
least they were familiar with the activity out here. And yeah, so there was some salmon that were taken. There was footprints followed up by the salmon that were taken off this guy's property, and I believe it was within the following few days in his backyard, as a return of gift, was an elk whose hide had been pulled down off of the skin. Again, very brutal. And then it was antlers were shoved into the tree branch, kind of, it was just hanging there like a wet, wind chime, a jerky wind chime. And so I think it was an elk too, which is, I mean, given the proximity
That's
to,
generous. That's really generous. That's
that
a
is
lot of
pretty
meat.
generous. Oh, and I think it was gutted too at the same time. So it was gutted, it was hide was pulled back, and there it was kind of hanging. But there's quite a few stories of, the sheer power of what we're talking about, of carrying hogs under both arms, like hopping over a farm fence, grabbing two giant hogs and hauling them like bales of hay under their arm. Deer being carried off as well. There's a fairly well known case involving, I believe, a park ranger with his wife that saw two Sasquatch chasing some deer across the lake, some elk across the lake, and actually pushing the elk to some hiding Sasquatch on the other side. So this is part of, when they're here in their physical form, Jill, I believe that they have to correspond with physical needs. And when
Sure.
they go off to La La Land and have cappuccino with Simeon Hine, I don't know what those needs are. They may be relic nutritions for these relic neutrinos, but when they're here, they got to get the real calorie intake.
Fair enough. I can't argue that logic. So so
Nor
hey,
would you want to try.
so let's move on. So our latest interview that we posted, we got a couple years ago at Phenomicon, as we were screening A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. We happened to grab Dr. Travis Taylor from The
Mhm.
Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, to share some thoughts and ideas that applied to our sequel, Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot. Now, it was a short interview. I think what in total it was like just under 8 minutes or something. But in reality, he had just been talking on stage, and he was kind of doing the shaking hands, kissing babies and all that stuff, and meeting people, and just like a politician has to work the room and whatnot. He was interacting with all the fans, and you could tell he was in a hurry. He had to get back to the ranch to do like serious stuff, and I stood right in his path, and I was just like, and he just looked. He's just like, what? What? And I was like, Dr. Taylor, will you do an interview? And he's just like, kind of like, oh, yeah. And he's like, I can do about 15 minutes. So by the time we got set up and did all the paperwork and whatnot, we just told
Mhm.
them what we were doing. We said we think there's a connection with Bigfoot and other other phenomena, and can you talk about it, and like what you're finding at Skinwalker Ranch, and how that could apply to the things people are experiencing that are outside the norm. So,
Hmm.
and that's exactly what he talked about. Now, what I wanted to mention, what I mentioned before we had to kill that first live stream, is that when I think of Skinwalker Ranch, I think of the Al Moon Lab and the stuff that you and Daryl experienced, and I'd even say the stuff that follows Daryl around. But
Hmm.
can you talk about that? Just because you were there, the carryover, the connections, and the synchronicities, the coincidences of
Hmm.
where Daryl was living and the activity on Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, let's talk about skinwalkers. I've been holding a story back for you, Jill and Brett and Mike. If you're listening, you've all been there. But for the most part, it's just been Daryl and I that have been regular attendees of the wilderness area behind his acreage and his house, which we called the lab. But Jeff Rohn, not too far from that area, went and checked on the area for me and ended up running into a guy standing in the middle of the road, which you and Brett are familiar with. And he waved Jeff over. Jeff, I think I'm getting the story right. Jeff kind of was checking on this guy who was obviously away from his usual environment, his house, in the middle of the woods. And so they got to talking. I think Jeff had on a shirt or something indicative of a Bigfoot image. And so the guy asked him if he was up there checking in on the Al Moon Lab. And, and Jeff said, well, yeah, kind of. And so he kind of pointed him in the direction where the things have happened. And so Jeff got some stories off of this guy. Now, it turns out that you and Brett know who this guy is. He's a neighbor, he's a plumber, and he's had some interesting stuff happen in and around the same environment that Daryl and I did. But he told some news stories. Not only has he seen some interesting lights, I believe he said varying colors, but he did see something black and lanky near the house in the woods. Now, that lanky part to me is really interesting because when Daryl, and you can help me out, Daryl, if I'm wrong, you described something that was otherwise kind of like Manute Bull, which was a pretty tall, I believe, African basketball player attached to the NBA, well over 7 feet tall, if I remember correctly, but very skinny. And this is what Daryl described. He didn't describe Patty. He described something that kind of looked like it was maybe, emaciated to some degree, but very tall and fast. And this is what this guy, I believe, described, something black and lanky. And it disappeared. And then a cougar came out of the other side of the area where this thing disappeared. Now, this reminds me, and he used the word, I saw a skinwalker, I believe, Jeff. This reminds me so much of what Rhonda described, and I believe her relative up in the Sierras. And so
Yeah.
using the word skinwalker to describe Skinwalker Ranch is pretty interesting. The fact I've never seen anybody at the Al Moon Lab when I go check on it. The fact that Jeff saw somebody, I think, is pretty interesting.
Mm.
Recently we had a air tag disappear from that area that was embedded and hidden in a plastic jar of peanut butter. The air tag is not active anymore. It was until a month ago. And so I'm looking at the plastic jar that was left behind with these two giant fang marks. And, there's so much mystery to the idea that, of course, something could have broken the air tag or digested it and, somehow disabled it. But the gifting, the feathers that, you're talking about are still happening to Daryl. I think Daryl sent maybe a couple pictures here. The phenomena refuses to go away as far as Daryl's concerned, and it has followed him to the East Coast. And he's still getting gifted objects, gemstones, rare things laid out in strange places. But inside of a locked vehicle, I believe 2 feathers I don't know. What do you think do you think there's a significance when it comes to feathers in in particular, Jill?
Okay, so let's talk about that. So, okay, here we go. So I'm not going to call out who, because I respect people's privacy. I'm not going to say who this person is, but someone messaged me about. Actually, Tobe, this involves you. Maybe I'm glad we're having this conversation. Um, this person put up a wood watcher and started. I'm going to jumble the story here because I'm going to try to keep it kind of short. Basically, where they put up a wood watcher, they're starting to have some activity come around the house from your wood carving. So I don't know if like what Sasquatch enchantments you are doing to your products, but anyways, this person mentioned that black like crow or raven feathers started showing up in places where they really should not have been. um it just was out of place, and it was odd, and it kind of coincided with when the activity started taking off, and they asked me if there was any correlation with that, and I was like, yes, maybe a little. I was I didn't want to just throw out all my theories at once, but I said, you know what? Go out to the tree line, go out to where the activity's happening, and just, set some boundaries, make an announcement, tell them, how you feel, and like either to leave you alone or not to come around the house or whatnot. And I said, you know what? You can send them my way. I figure we'd spice things up around here. Um, and this was like, I think yesterday, yeah, yesterday morning, this exchange happened. And I went out on my walk. Now, okay, I'll get to that in a second. So as I'm walking, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the people said, "You really just have to pay attention to your intuition." And right when they said that, I just happened to look down, and there was a pretty good sized black crow feather, and I was like, "Interesting coincidence." So I picked it up, as I do. I have a. Let me see here. I happen I They follow me. Um, we'll get into that in just a minute. But I picked it up and I was like, well, this doesn't really mean anything at the moment. It just, I found a crow feather. And then as I was walking, I heard is like, you have to go out in the field. It's like, go out in the field. It's like something took me and marched me off, and not just like the path of least resistance, like go out into this field the easy way. It was like I was being pulled in like a specific direction, and then it was like I hear like look down, like someone just pushes my head down, and there was another black feather just kind of stuck there amongst flowers. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I took them home. That was the photo on the YouTube channel in the community section. The two the feathers, and here's something. So when after the very first time, Brett, Mike, and I went down to the woods where you and Daryl showed us around that first interview. I don't know if you remember this, but I found there was an owl feather, just a little fluffy one, just kind of resting on like top of some ferns or something. It was very like it seemed very to me very purposeful, like it was there for a
Mm-hmm.
reason. And I remember taking it and I'm like, "Oh, I have my little something, my little souvenir from the shoot from being here." And by no means am I trying to compare this to when the Brady kids found the tiki on the Hawaiian vacation, but it really seemed like after I got that feather, things started kind of popping off around our house and kind of set me on this like feather journey, if that makes any sense. I know a lot of people talk about feathers are like gifts from spirit, or if spirit's trying to get your attention, they'll leave you feathers. And it's really weird because after that whole that first visit to the Owl Moon, where you also sent me home with a branch, a branch that something looped into a knot, which is hanging up in the corner there. Um, on my morning walks, I would start finding black feathers in my path. Very deliberate, not just random. And this wasn't, I know someone mentioned, like, oh, right now it's molting season for the crows. But this happened like 2 years nonstop. And what was really weird is like I would find them almost like they'd be like sticking, like stuck in the cracks of the pavement, like in the little dirt in
Oh.
between, or like kind of
Mhm.
lining, like paralleling each other, lining the sidewalk. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this isn't just it falling out of the tree and landing with the quill down. It's like something stuck it down in there. This is where it gets weird. So, oh yeah, and then I started finding like glyphs were appearing on my walks. That's the whole. We'll save that for a glyph episode, a glyph live stream. But
Glyph Berkman.
yes.
Go ahead.
But something kind of weird started happening later on. Is like I'd start finding feathers again, and I'd be like, I've already found these. I've done this, and I would like on autopilot. I'd find myself sticking them in the ground and in like the concrete, like the way that I was finding them. And
Yeah.
like I've been doing this for a while, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is weird. This just seems really weird. And so then I start wondering, like, was this some sort of like time slip? Was I doing this? Did
Mhm.
like times like merge somehow from like when I was finding them and putting them down to when I was finding them the first time? I don't know. I just want to throw that out. But I do know, just to kind of, I really took the long path to circle up on this one. But we hear from a lot of people that they are gifted feathers during their encounters. And I know, yeah, and like especially like the stories Daryl has where
Mhm.
he's finding feathers, but they're like you said, they're like in a locked truck or in places in boxes where there shouldn't be anything.
Well, and the way that you describe the quill being poked down is something that I've seen on a couple occasions. People describe that. Um, I know Paul Graves and I were in a place up above Wenatchee and came upon an eagle feather that was stabbed off trail down in the ground. It just seems like such an obvious ploy to say, "A, take notice of me, and this is a gift, or this is some kind of, you know, I don't think it's a harbinger." I'm looking at the quotes right now here from some of the people online about, uh, Arla in particular, talking about the spiritual nature of getting feathers from a First Nations point of view. And I think that's probably right. I mean, it could be that they want you to have some kind of ceremony with that feather. Certainly, I'm looking at a couple of feathers that are, in my room here that are of large size that you would use with cockle shell and
Hmm.
Palo Santo or sage or something like that to clean your room. And if you look into, I mean, before people actually are doubting Thomas's towards the idea of burning something like sage or Palo Santo, look at the scientific ramifications of burning sage and Palo Santo as a disinfectant. And so if it is a disinfectant of some kind, then just kind of quantify that out to, the spiritual world. And I think that's probably good enough, right? Like if it has one medicinal meaning behind it, maybe it has multiple. But um, there's so much to say about the idea of what I mean. This really started talking about Dr. Travis Taylor. And, Dr. Travis Taylor gets a little bit of pushback from some of the community based upon his origins having a DOD connection. And however, on the show, it is a scripted show. He kind of leads the narration of it being a scripted show. However, I can't actually see him delivering lines that he disagrees with. Like, you see the authentic curiosity that he's being outplayed as a physicist, and that's probably really frustrating and fascinating at the same time. I can only imagine, so much of what we went through was just based upon, us having a gut instinct that this was not normal and natural. And we didn't do anywhere near what was being done in Utah. So seeing how much money that they're throwing at the show, and over the years, the stuff we haven't even heard about, it's just, to be outplayed by that sense is endlessly fascinating and frustrating. And I would think that he would probably be a changed man by that experience. You can't help but go through this journey. I mean, listen, we've seen this firsthand with people we know within the last couple of weeks that are endlessly frustrated with this phenomena to the point of exhaustion. And that exhaustion comes from a place of ego. And it just does, because you want validation for your discovery. And it's going to kill you. Man, it's going to kill you. It's going to ruin you. And so all you can do is just enjoy the fact that it exists. And yes, there's probably a science behind it, but damn, I think it's freaking magic. I think science is, this is something that TJ Ravenwolf said too. He spoke quite a bit about this on stage and in Utah with us, that science is man's ego to try to explain the things that he can't. And I think there's a little bit of truth in that, because there's so much out there that I don't think we're ever going to get to the answer to. And if we just call it unanswered science, I think it discredits the beauty of it. Not that science isn't beautiful, but I think there are legitimate rabbit holes that don't end. We're not going to get to the end of all these rabbit holes. And maybe gifting is just one of those.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I do want to say a special prayer, though, to that area of Cottage Grove right now, because of the fact that the land needs to be cleaned because of some criminal acts that have happened in and around that area there. So definitely bring some sage with you out that way and say a prayer. Won't get into all that, but also due to the Bohemia mining claim and the level 2 evacuation area of Culp Creek, Sharps Creek, Cottage Grove Lake, Dorena Lake. That is kind of where everything started for me, was the Bohemia area. It's where Autumn Williams took me. It's where I saw my possible first nesting site up in a cave. And it's one of the most beautiful, stunning old growth areas, and a rich gold mining area as well. And I think it's all on fire right now. So to the people that know that area well, including John Bull, also known as Psycho Fu, here on the chat, let's just hope that everything turns out up in that old area.
Now, hey, Tope, have you talked to Tara Harris at all about some of the recent activity up there?
Well, so the conversation now, Tara Harris, will remind folks, is the town psychic. She's on camera with the little tiny micro orb going across her eye, caught from 2 camera angles. And I don't want to say too much here, but Tara's informed about what's going on as far as the land needing to be blessed. I don't know where all that stands right now with her and local law enforcement. But anyway, that's kind of what I'll say about it right now. If people want to know more about what we're talking about, they can go look it up on local news and whatnot. But now you got me saying whatnot. Also, I wanted to mention, Jill, here, whatnot is that, there's some working theories here. I know that Todd Neese, we need to go back to Oak Ridge for a second here.
Sure.
And to Todd Neese, who gave a lecture about the puzzling attributes of Sasquatch, and he's one of the guys that talked about fiber optics being kind of the biological answer to how cloaking may work. So therefore, like the hair of the Sasquatch basically bends light, kind of like a polar bear does a little bit inside the Arctic. And the same thing is happening with Sasquatch, where they're able to kind of cloak just by bending light through the follicles in their hair. And he goes on from there with other theories about bioluminescence and eye glow and eye shine. But one of the wackier things that we started thinking about was, what if eye glow, in particular blue eye shine, which was reported from our area, it reminded us so much of the Fremen from Dune, right? Like they had sight within sight and had these glowing blue eyes. And so maybe one of the theories here, and this gets into the stoned ape theory, is that somehow, maybe some way, not spice melange, but according to Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, it was a giant hallucinogenic mushroom trip that the Fremen were on. And, this is where it came from, including the idea that there's worms in and around these psychogenic mushrooms. And so there's a lot of little weird crossover things going on with Dune and our story. But in general, what if we're talking about bioluminescence being a mushroom-induced state? Not unlike the term had in Dune. What do you think of that theory?
Oh, that's interesting.
At least it's cool.
Yeah, I'm not doubting or questioning the level of cool. I'm just I'm going through my category of fungus, and you know what? Actually, Brett and I were really hip on fungus for a while, because back in late 2019, we were developing a whole film about a fungus type. We'll have that conversation later. Anyways, no, I think that's a great theory. I'm just trying to think as far as bioluminescent like triggers.
Iowa doesn't like my theory. I'm looking at the comments here. No, it's just it's a fun theory. It's one of the things that was a gift, right, at our little area.
Oh,
but it's something.
Right. Yeah,
it's just one of the things that is science looking for an answer when a theory like that pokes its head up, maybe. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people taking psychoactive substances that don't have glowing blue eyes. Although I have seen, and there is a gal that works at the local Fred Meyer's in Gig Harbor that does have blue skin. And when you see somebody that has blue skin, and I think it's from taking, what was that?
Colloidal silver, the silver.
Colloidal silver.
Colloidal silver.
Like an OD of colloidal silver will turn you, you'll be looking like the guy from the Olympics. You'll just have blue skin. And it's just one of the things that happen now. Could that happen with your eyes? Maybe. You don't know.
We'll have to explore that later. We're getting a little off topic, but so that's my feather theory, and I'm sticking to it. Trying to think. Let's see here. What else? I mean, just a little housekeeping here on what's going on. We're still working on Voices in the Wilderness. We have 2 big months of filming ahead of us, and get ready for all those updates. That will be amazing. And yeah, we're just, trucking along. We have some other things in the works, and we just wanted to, Brett and I were talking about this, just because, like, with James' encounter that he shared with us and the others that we get, if you have something you want us to share, by all means, send it to us. info@bigfootdoc.com is the best way to reach us. Yeah, and just just let us know if you want us to share it or whatnot, or reenact it. We'll do some reenactments.
Jill, I have to mention too is that before it came on, I watched I think it's season 4, episode 5 of the new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. It's all about flying humanoids, including Owlman and Mothman. It has Lon Strickler in it and another rabid Chicago Mothman hunter. And they interview some really compelling witnesses about flying humanoids, including wingless humanoids that just sit there and hover with glowing eyes. So if you haven't had a chance to go find that, maybe make that your Thursday evening
Okay.
pastime.
Okay.
Also, last night we did a night viewing party out on the Straits of Juan de Fuca, looking for phenomena in the night sky, cloudless night sky, and near the Draco star system and the Vega star system. You'll have to find those on your own, or you can go to the Big Dipper. And if you go to the ladle of the Big Dipper on the far right hand side of the ladle, and you go 2 handfuls to the right, that means you hold out your hands wide and you go 2 handfuls to the right. That's Vega. And if you go to the handle of the Big Dipper and go 2 handfuls to the left, that's Draco. And so those 2 star systems are really active for whatever reason for phenomena, in particular these flashes of light that maintain their triangulation. That means they're just not moving. They're stable flashes of light. So I don't know what that is, but it's something interesting for people to do.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, well, folks, you heard it from Tobe. Keep your eyes on the sky and your feet in the forest. He didn't really say that, but it just kind of
No,
it
he
just
did not.
sounded good. Um, Anything else? Is there anything else we're skipping or forgetting? I feel like there was something
Um,
else.
well, tomorrow evening at 7, don't forget, if you do have a ticket to Olympic Strange Days, you have your orientation meeting at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There is a link in your email if you have a ticket. We still have about, I would say, roughly about 20 of you that I need to get a hold of beforehand. We'll do these semi-weekly for about a half hour each. Some good questions last time, in particular from people that had maybe some concerns about firearms, maybe some concerns about having animals. All good questions. We are going to have Starlink available up there. That was kind of a touch and go issue. Again, Nancy Fry, myself, are kind of heading this thing up. But this week, we're actually headed up to the area to look for a secondary site, just in case there are forest fires, so we can have a secondary site on hand and ready to go. And we're actually going to premiere like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or something like that, and sit in the woods and do a nighttime theater with her 01 battery case in the woods, just so we can see. She got a really great projector, and so we're going to just go out there and play with the projector in the woods and make sure everything's tight and ready to go in September.
Very, very awesome. I'll tell you what, Brett told me to hang on, so I'm just gonna kind of drag this out as I tend to do. Um, yeah, and I just happened to see in the chat, what someone had a pterodactyl sighting.
Oh,
People,
I don't see that.
well, you're not. Well, are you looking?
I can't look and chew gum at the same time here. No, leathery winged creature pterodactyl, like elongated head. John Day, fossil bed, and my hubby yelled, "Look at what we saw in the rear end of the edge of the wing that looked like a pterodactyl." That's from Llewellyn P. Wow. Well, she's not alone, for crying out loud. There's people down in Grants Pass, not too far from where you are, Jeff Roan, that they've actually felt the wings and heard the leathery flap of a pterodactyl, seen the conical shaped head. I think it was very close to the logging road as it came through, broad daylight kind of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe some of these flying humanoids, are actually explainable as being dinosaurs.
Do we
Dinosaurs.
do we have a fossil record of these humanoid dinosaur sleaze stack? Land land of the lost reptilian overlords.
I love Sleestack. That and Chaka.
Boy, that photo's making the rounds. Yeah, a lot of people are.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm talking about? This photo that keeps going around where people are like, "It's a baby Sasquatch," and people are like, "No, it's Chaka." I.
Oh,
It looks
is
like
this the IR
a.
one?
It looks
Yeah.
like a. All I know is whatever it is, it's given some serious side eye. It's just like
Mm.
it is
Well, I
not
know that
impressed.
I've seen an IR footage of something that looks like the old what's known as the Jacobs photo of something that seems to kind of have maybe like a hawked foot of some kind, and it's furry and its back's turned and it's in black and white. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it looks
Okay.
now that we've opened this can of worms, just prepare yourself for like 50 people to send you photos of it
No.
on Facebook. So,
Mm.
okay.
Well, real quick on the pterodactyl, Nancy Fry tells of a Coast Guard, a coastie as we call them, a guy in the Coast Guard that was on duty with other shipmates out, I believe, in Alaska, and they heard something land on their roof that was huge. And I believe they heard the clicky click click of the claws stomping around on the roof, and they were so unnerved by it, nobody would go out to check. So it probably was something bigger than an average, you know, predator or yeah. So I don't know what that could have been.
I don't know. There's a lot of interesting, unbelievable, mysterious things that are happening in our universe, and a lot of people are experiencing them. And I think the more we talk about it and the more we normalize the conversation, maybe we can solve the mystery or at least get close.
And that's a way to close it out, Jill. As always, thanks for joining us. I am thankful for my Bigfoot pee. I'm thankful for you and the stream working out. And as we say, I will see you in the brush.
Okay, that is Tobe Johnson signing off from Brett's cell phone. Okay,
All
thanks,
right.
Tobe. See you later.
Bye.
Now that Tobe's off the line, we can like actually talk about really cool stuff now. Just kidding. Alrighty, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and sorry about that weird technical snafu. Alrighty, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.